Welcome, everyone. My name is Hallie Caldwell, and I'm a member of the Quad Education team. Welcome to our webinar on discovering the best type of school for you. We have two fantastic um, panelists here today with us that work with Education as expert admissions consultants, and they are here with tons of knowledge to share with you. Quad Education is a company that focuses on helping students prepare for college, everything from early candidacy development from middle school, early high school years through college applications, choosing what schools you want to apply to, SAT, ACT prep, interviews, scholarships, really every part of the admissions process. And we look forward to sharing our information with you today. So we will dive in. So we'll introduce our panelists, talk about the different types of colleges and schools, and compare the different categories they fall into and how they differ. We'll talk about how to determine which school is best for you, tips on building a tailored school list. And then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. So let's introduce our panelists. We have Arianna Lee with us and Dr. Nika Krako. Arianna, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name's Arianna, graduated from Dartmouth College with a bachelor's in neuroscience, worked in admissions there, as well as with QuestBridge, helping many students like yourselves help craft a great list and ask questions that this panel is definitely going to get further into. So I'm excited about the topic.
Great. Thanks so much for being here. Dr. Nick, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Dr. Nika Krako. I graduated from Vanderbilt University with my bachelor's in history and anthropology. Then I got my master's at Vanderbilt in higher education administration, college counseling certificate from UCLA, and my doctorate from the University of Houston, which is where I'm coming to you from now. What I think this is going to be really helpful is that a lot of times students and families are thinking about college, but there's a lot of different types of colleges, a lot of different ways to experience higher education. So what we hope to do today is kind of give you a rundown as to the different types and terminology so that you're well versed in the many options you have that await you after high school.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Dr. Nick. It's a pleasure to have you both. Let's just dive right in. So what are the different types of schools that exist? I'm going to dive into a bunch of different categories. So public universities. Arianna, you want to take this?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, public universities, that would typically be more of your larger state population, larger student population, more of state schools. As a result, larger class sizes due to the university size. So they will have many different major options. They'll have connections maybe to local hospitals or different programs that they'll allow students to be a part of. Extracurriculars, they'll have guest speakers or lecturers that will be able to come in. A lot more may be available at these public universities. They also have larger campuses, class sizes. Public colleges often have more amenities, housing options, arts, funding. So a lot more with financial aid as well, athletic centers, and just to name a few. So a lot more with these public universities because they do have that state funding. Yeah, that's often it.
Yeah, just a couple of things I would add to that. So public universities, first and foremost, are created by that state to educate the population. So I one time had one of my Texas moms call me and she said, I was reading on the University of California site that they favor Californians. Is that true? The answer is yes, just like University of Texas favors Texans. So some of the more like sought after public universities like a Michigan, University of Virginia, North Carolina, one thing to keep in mind is in North Carolina and Virginia, 2/3 of the freshman class must come from the Commonwealth of Virginia or the state of North Carolina by state law. So 1/3 of the seats are fought over by the rest of the world. You also might find that sometimes universities have reciprocity agreements. So for example, I worked at a school in Ohio and we had an agreement with University of Kentucky that they would treat our students very similarly for admission and oftentimes financial aid purposes, or even the actual like in-state tuition. So that's not everywhere, but those are common things where if you live in one state, you might very well have a reciprocity agreement with other states that you border.
Okay.
Great, thank you both. So then you have private universities in contrast to public.
Yeah, so private universities can be all different sizes, from very small, like an Olin School of Engineering up in Boston, to much larger. Typically, I would say the vast majority of private universities, the mid-size that we call, are usually between about 5,000 to 9,000 students. There's no hard and fast rule as to what exactly that looks like, but these oftentimes will have a specific mission or sort of ethos to who they are. It might be something about the founding principles of that university. We want a place for people to work together and share ideas, or it could be a place that might have a religious affiliation, and that can be part of that component. There are some schools where the religious affiliation is a very, very big part of the experience. Other times it's not part of it. It's not a major part of it necessarily, or it's something that you can kind of customize. So oftentimes I'll have students who may not be interested in a religious institution, but because there might be a theology requirement, but that need not be studying scripture. It could be, media and religion, for example. So some of these are, again, the mid-sized research universities where you're going to find about 6,000, 10,000 students, the nice sports field, but they can also be on the smaller side, and it might be a little bit more of like a liberal arts experience, which we'll talk about in detail.
Awesome.
Arianna, anything to add there?
No, it's so wonderfully put.
Cool.
All right, so this is a chart that compares and contrasts a little bit more, a lot of what we said, but we can go over it briefly before we dive on to the next topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So with funding, private versus public, so you will just as Dr. Nick said, private is heavily relying on donations, investments, tuitions to kind of build up that funding, whereas the public university is going to have that state or federal government funding, but it is prioritized for state residents. Whereas private universities, it isn't preferential to in-state or out-of-state students because they are relying on those particular factors to make up their funding. The size of the private university is going to be smaller class sizes. However, I will say, just for me personally, doing classes at Dartmouth College versus University of Michigan, I did find that the class sizes at University of Michigan were actually smaller. It also depends on the type of classes that you're looking at. And then for in-state versus out-of-state tuition, just as I said, private universities, they don't prioritize for either. So it won't matter as far as that cost. Whereas the public university, it is dependent on whether you are in-state. Just like Dr. Nick said, they do have that preference to in-state students. For example, for University of Michigan, they have something called the Go Blue Guarantee, where they offer in-state students pretty much a free ride just for making under a certain amount and also being in-state. Public universities do also have a larger student body, larger class sizes. However, it depends on what you're looking for the class. Every school's Psych 1 or Bio 1 is going to be large, so that won't really matter. But tends to be larger class size in general, because if you go to a University of Michigan football game versus a private school's football game, it's going to be a whole different turnout. But, that is what it is.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed that a lot of public universities have been doing is that because they always kind of get critiqued for it's so big and the big lecture classes and whatnot, they often have an honors college, which will give you kind of more of that mid-sized research institution feel with academic instruction, with all the benefits of a large public university. The other thing, and we sort of touched upon it, but I can remember when I did college fairs on the university side, I would often get asked about in-state, out-of-state. Well, if I'm working at Vanderbilt and Penn, which are both private institutions, it doesn't matter what state you're from. So everybody kind of pays the same rate. It only refers to those public schools within your state, or if they have one of those reciprocity agreements. That said, when we'll talk more about this later, don't write off a school because of the sticker price, because some of these places have very generous financial aid. Dartmouth is one, Penn is one, Vanderbilt's one. where even though the sticker price might be very large, it actually could be cheaper than your in-state public option. So that very well could happen. So don't look at the sticker price and assume that's what you've got to pay. Don't assume you don't qualify for financial aid because your neighbor didn't. Until you ask, the answer is no. So research that.
All right, we'll talk about 4-year versus 2-year schools and start with 4-year.
Yeah, so 4-year colleges, universities are pretty much what everyone thinks about when they think about the college experience. You can sometimes make this a shorter experience, whether you're bringing in AP credits, or some states have a dual enrollment agreement where you take community college classes as a high school senior or junior, and that typically will then transfer into the state system. But oftentimes private universities may not honor those dual enrollment credits. So it just kind of depends on where you are. But again, you have the 4-year experience. Typically, students will live on campus. Sometimes they'll live off campus, or they might be living with a family. But generally speaking, most students will be living on campus. It depends on the campus priorities, or policies, I should say, about how they want their students housed. You've got lots of major and minor options. And I can also tell you lots of universities will let you customize your major. So if you don't like the standard issue stuff, take a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. Oftentimes they'll let you do that. Pretty much everybody has study abroad. I always sort of laugh when I can study abroad there. You can study abroad pretty much everywhere. Lots of great programs out there. And oftentimes universities will say, if you really want to go to a country that we don't have a program in, but this other university does, we'll work with them to have you do that. So if you've really got one very particular place in mind that may not be as popular as like a Florence, Italy, or what have you, they'll work to find a way to make it happen. But again, you have a nice campus culture. Everyone's kind of together, lots of activities to avail yourself of, and lots of amenities.
I will say with the 4-year colleges and universities too, they know that you are typically coming from high school, or you're growing with the university. So they are going to pour more into orientations and freshman events and things of that nature to kind of just really build out that campus culture.
All right, let's talk a little bit about 2-year universities or colleges.
Awesome. So 2-year colleges, so that could be, if you heard junior college, community college, trade school, these are all considered 2-year, not to be mistaken for master's or graduates programs, because they also could be 2-year too. But students generally end up from these 2-year university or 2-year colleges with earning associate degrees or certifications. So that could be more, like CNAs in the nursing or medical field, or electrician, or anything that would be more of a specialized or focalized field choice. 2-year schools are generally commuter schools, so no on-campus housing is available typically. They are a lot less expensive, pretty much because of those reasons as well. They do have a more narrow academic focus because you're pretty much fulfilling either the general education requirements or that very specific field that you're going into. Again, you can too with the 2-year school, like Dr. Nick mentioned as well, a lot of them are partnering with high schools. So you can also do a lot of the 2-year classes within the high school as well and earn that associate's degree within a year after graduating. And then transfer to a 4-year university to finish up the degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a really smart thing for students, no matter where you live, in the United States, if you're going to a community college, you get your general ed credits out of the way, you do your first 2 years there, and then you can transfer to a 4-year school, public or private. There's no shame in going to a community college at all. They're not going to say, how come you didn't start your college career somewhere else? But that's a very smart way to get a lot of the stuff out, and also save money at the same time. And again, no one has to ever know that you went to community college. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but your degree will say 4-year university, and then that's kind of all it is. I do think there's something to be said for the 4 years on campus, but this is also like just that experience. But that said, if we're looking at money and just being smart and efficient, this is really the way to go. So it's not for everybody, but it is, it is an option. Or you can also use community college classes during the summer once you've enrolled at that 4 year to sometimes knock out some of those other classes so that you can focus more on your major or get some research, your internship experience, what have you. It just frees up time.
Great. Thank you both. So a little bit more about 2-year and 4-year schools. I think we went over the majority of this. So we can just gloss over it before we move on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got the lower cost with the community colleges at the 2-year program. Of course, 4-year, even for your public in-state, chances are going to be good. It will be a little bit more. Of course, financial aid and scholarship dollars can play a role in that. And again, you'll have a smaller class size. Usually it's a little bit larger at the 4 years, but again, that's typically as you go through your program, you find your class sizes get smaller. But, as Arianna had said, anything that's a freshman level sort of survey general ed course might be very large, but oftentimes they'll have lecture on like Monday, Wednesday, and it'll have like a small lecture of like 15 students in what they call a seminar style in college classes. Basically, seminar means it's just a discussion class, so you're just kind of sitting around like that. But again, also, community colleges are not going to have as many options to think about. Where it's 4-year, you can often find lots of different things. And the environment is going to be very much, it's a suitcase commuter school. They're going to come in, they might have some activities, but for the most part, student life will take place kind of, outwards. Whereas on a 4-year campus, it's more likely to be right there in the dormitories, residence halls, athletic facilities, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. And I would say too, if you haven't already, I would check and see if your high school, if your high school offers any classes or any joint classes where you can at least see if that's an option that you would be interested in doing.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about other common types of schools. Universities, liberal arts colleges, research colleges, and universities are all phrases that get thrown out a lot. Let's talk about what they are.
Absolutely. So universities, those are going to be options for students to pursue higher education. They're going to offer diverse undergraduate programs, graduate degrees, PhD programs that you can get from a university because they will have that graduate component typically. Universities are typically larger establishments. They have different community culture. They do partner more with the local environment, local community. So they may have more options for you to partner with a local hospital, do research with the local community, things of that nature. Liberal arts college is primarily focused on that undergraduate education. So for example, Brown will have a high focus on that undergraduate education as well, with the freedom to choose any major, any classes that you want without any type of repercussion. And they have focused more on the literature, history, soft science, languages, math, life science type of fields. Then you have your research college universities that are heavily focused on research. They tend to emphasize research within their curriculum, making it more so mandatory, a lot more opportunities for undergraduate students to participate in research and kind of build up if you're looking to go more engineering or within that STEM field regime. That might be more of a college or university that you pursue, like a technical, I'm trying to think of one, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. One of those types of schools would be more research heavy focused.
Yeah, and a couple of things here. I mean, speaking of research, like when you look at liberal arts colleges, there's a lot of misconceptions as to what that term means. First off, it has nothing to do with politics. It's not liberal versus conservative. It's nothing to do with that. And when people see arts, they think it's only arts. The reality is they have amazing sciences, physics, biology, chemistry, everything that you'd find at any other college. And there's no graduate students to compete with. So the least you need to know what university versus college university means, you've got the umbrella university, which then has College of Arts and Science, engineering, nursing, music, business, what have you. But it's all under the umbrella of that top or that one name of the university, where colleges typically don't have any graduate programs, or if they do, it might be a handful. So really what happens is, whereas if you're at a large university or research university, you very well might be competing with master's and doctoral candidates, Whereas if you're at a liberal arts college and you're doing research, and it need not be science, it could be kind of anything for that matter, you're much more likely to get the attention of the professor and oftentimes the publishing credit if they publish that work. So it's a great thing to think about. So don't write off liberal arts if you're a science person. There's lots of great science and math offerings at these places.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit more about other common types of schools that you might have come across.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about community colleges. These are, 2-year institutions typically. And it depends on where you live. Some places might have one that everybody within a half-hour driving radius goes to, or there might be a multitude of different options. It really like the maddening answer to how do the colleges do, this is always it depends. So it could be a different thing based on your state and government, and also even county laws can play a role in this. You also have some students who might go into vocational, training, and that could be everything from cosmetology to automotive. I'm not exactly sure what the study of plumbing is, but that'd be another one. Oftentimes, this might be a family that's already done this. It's kind of been like a culture that they've had, so that can work out really well if that's what you decide to do. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. You will find that a lot of like what I always do when I'm working with students is if they tell me they like college A, I say, okay, if you like college A, you might like B, C, and D. It's kind of like when you listen to something on Spotify or you buy something on Amazon, they say people who like this also like that. So that's how we kind of build a list. But again, some of these places might have a religious affiliation, and that can be very, very strongly pronounced. Like if you're at a Brigham Young or a Pepperdine, and it may not be even noticed by students. Like American University in Washington, D.C. is Methodist. And I think a lot of them might be surprised to hear that because it's not as huge a focus. You also have schools that are all one gender, all women colleges or all men colleges. This can be, it's really interesting. Like I never visited women's colleges during my own search, but as a college counselor, I did. And so I would actually go to these places and they're really awesome institutions. They really do a great job of educating that, populace. You also have HBCUs. So these are all historically Black college universities, places like Howard up in DC, where Kamala Harris went. You got Morehouse in Atlanta and Spelman. Morehouse is all male, Spelman is all female. So they also have Hispanic serving institutions. So this could be a part of your experience as well. And also being around people who really have a good sense as to what your background is kind of like. And we also have art schools. So if you decide you really want to paint or film or sing or what have you, we've had students who did architecture. Sometimes that requires a portfolio or audition. Sometimes it doesn't. It just sort of depends on the program. Same thing for anyone who's doing, music as a, performing arts. That can be a big part of it too.
Absolutely. I would say too, with kind of crafting that college list, really kind of determine, like you said, Dr. Nick, as far as what you are looking for, what are the similarities between the schools that you all may already be interested in, or if you don't even have a starting list, maybe just write out things that you imagine your college experience to include. Is it cost? Is it, and we're getting more into that too. We'll go further into that.
Yeah, great. I think one thing we don't have here too in specialized colleges, you have culinary schools in there. You have a ton of other very specialty schools that singularly focus on something that you might be interested in. And it's definitely worth checking out. And also many of these are combined with other categories as well. They're not all, it's not one or the other for a lot of them. All right, so let's talk about which type of school is best for you. And we're really here diving into how to start curating your college list, how to figure out what schools you want to be applying to, or maybe which schools you want to visit to then narrow down your list. So let's talk about some factors to consider. Our first two being location and cost.
Absolutely. Sometimes I get students and they say, hey, put me as far away from my family as possible. And sometimes I get the student that's like, hey, I need to be as close, So proximity to family, whether you like a city type of environment or you don't mind being in the middle of nowhere, like Dartmouth and Hanover, that it depends on what you like, as well as climate. Maybe you love the cold. We saw from the past we're still in winter. If you love playing in the snow, maybe you choose more of a northeastern or northern school. Or maybe if you love the heat, being near water, maybe you look at California or somewhere around the coast. Really trying to figure out those factors if they're important to you as far as that for location. Now, the big one is cost, or at least big one for me. So like we talked about before, that in-state versus out-of-state tuition. Dr. Nick mentioned something really important as far as sometimes the sticker price may not be the actual price that you would be paying for. So don't let that be the deterrent. Still make your list as if that isn't the factor, and then maybe go through and see what that net cost would look like. Look at financial aid options as far as particular schools. Maybe you don't have the luxury to really explore out-of-state options. Maybe talk to someone or maybe look at the financial aid options and see if that's a possibility, or scholarships that might be offered at the particular schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say keep an open mind. So sometimes I'll have students who will say, I haven't found the one. Meaning that there's this one college out there. There's what I always tell students is, the good news is there's hundreds of places you can be happy at. The bad news is you got to go find out what those are. And there are colleges that weren't even on my radar in high school that I then saw as a college counselor, because I visited 5 colleges during my own college search. And as a college counselor, I've been to about 200, all different shapes, sizes, and locations. And a couple of things here. There's places that I've walked on like, this place is awesome. I totally would have applied here. But you also realize too that they're actually not that different. There's a lot of things that they offer, but you also will get this kind of gut feel. And it sounds a little mystical almost, but I've walked on campus and go, this just feels right. And I've also said, I myself would never go here. I have nothing against the school at all, but might be right for one of the students with whom I'm working. So the other thing too is with the location, like I would say it doesn't matter where the student lives in the United States or even worldwide for that matter, they'll always say 2 to 3 hours from home, not too far, not too close, because they're afraid that mom is going to show up every day, make a breakfast. And that actually has occurred in some cases, but that's another story. But all that to say that they want to be close, but not too far away. And oftentimes students will have no problem with a 10-hour drive in the car, but the 2-hour flight is just unthinkable. And I get there's a control element to it, but keep an open mind. I famously had a college classmate who was from Phoenix, Arizona, and her mom said, you may go to any college which has a direct Southwest flight from Phoenix. So that was their criteria. So it just kind of depends. But this is also a time when you can see a totally different part of the world, a totally different culture, a totally different region. You can also think about schools abroad. We've had that as well, or maybe even study an entire year abroad. That's happened. That's another option out there.
Absolutely. Great things to think about here. Let's dive into, we have a bunch of factors to consider. So school size and academics are next. We've talked a little bit about school size, but we're going to dive in even more.
Yeah, so I would say that it's interesting. So I went to a high school with 33 kids in my graduating class. Like it was really, really, really small. And I'll tell you, like when I walk around some of the large state institutions, whether I'm at University of Houston right here, or at UCLA or what have you, there's a lot of people. There's other throngs and throngs of people. And so that can be a little overwhelming for me. But what I've also found, and I've had students who have gone to these institutions, they do find ways to make it fine small. And that can be through their extracurricular activities. Some of them might participate in Greek life or pre-professional society. And it's interesting because there's students who I would meet as a senior who were my exact same year of graduation, but we hadn't talked to each other for like the first 3 years. You never knew that. So there's a lot of different things to kind of think about here, but you also realize is if you're looking for that individualized attention, even at the larger places, you can certainly have that. You can certainly find that. And oftentimes, students may not be aware of this, but your parents probably are. Faculty members will hold what are called office hours, which are basically, I'm in my office, come on by. If that doesn't work, we can find a time to meet. But during that time, I'm absolutely here for you. And with the academics, different areas of study. I've been talking to a lot of students where you can, of course, kind of create your own program. I've been proposing that a lot. Also, what you'll find is that your faculty have lots of great experiences and have also worked at multiple institutions. And that gives you a really unique lens in which to view your education because you get to, sort of tap from all of those. Also, college bulletin boards are full with opportunities to get involved or research or participate in a study or what have you. So definitely avail yourself of that. One piece of advice I'd give, no matter where you go to college or what you want to do, look at all these opportunities that the university or college is putting together, all that programming and effort that they put in to show you a more holistic experience.
Absolutely. And I will say some of the most successful people have graduated from everywhere. So it doesn't define you from what school you go to. You can still be successful no matter what. And then also, as far as the school size, I often find that the larger schools, as far as class sizes, are larger in campus with it as well. So you can find it to be smaller because they'll have those college of business or health college, or they'll break it down into smaller portions, so you can still make it feel quaint even though it's not.
Absolutely. Class profile and campus life.
Awesome. So for other things to consider, if you are putting schools on your list, I always recommend to break it into multiple categories as far as reach, match, and safety. Just so that way you can kind of know as far as the breakdown, as far for what schools you have a likelihood to get into and what schools may be a little bit more difficult to. So you look at the class average GPA that was accepted into, SAT, ACT scores, and of course diversity, if that is a factor that is important to you as well. Now SAT, ACT scores, they were not really that big of a factor the past few years, or I won't say not big of a factor. They were optional. So that might not be something that you are looking into, or maybe it is. Average GPA, if you are looking at schools that are above your GPA, those are going to be more of your reach schools. Same with SAT or ACT score. Some that are on par will more likely be your match schools, and ones that have average GPA that are lower than your GPA, those will tend to be your safeties. And then campus life. Maybe you're looking for a school that offers great room and board. Maybe you want to look at the options that they have as far as cost, or is it available to be near particular locations that you're going to be studying at? And then the amenities, is it something that they're offering freshman housing or housing all 4 years? Some universities don't offer housing all 4 years, or is not guaranteed. The values of the school. Maybe it's a school that is heavily religious focused, and that's not something that you want to necessarily pursue. So maybe that's a factor that you cross off your list. Sorry if I'm going too fast. I tend to talk fast, you all. Apologies.
You're perfect.
And I would just say too, like it sort of drives me bonkers when colleges will actually post their quote average GPA, because every high school, and Arianna, I can see that's experience too. Every high school's got its own GPA: 4.5, 6.10, 13, 11, 100. We don't believe in grades. I had a high school that didn't give grades. So it's kind of hard to do that. So, but here's the thing: many high schools, I should say, offer some sort of software called Score, Maya Learning, Naviance, or they even just have records, and they can say students who had a GPA similar to yours in the past have fared this well. So that data is way more than whatever this college is, putting out. I remember University of Richmond, they talked about this, and they said our average GPA is 26.4. And the way they did, they just treated every GPA like they were equal and averaged them together, and that's what it was. So all of that to say, you want to see what was available at your high school and what you did with that. So the GPA is a very poor academic summary because it tells you kind of what their grades and roughly what their curriculum might be. But again, some of them are weighted, some of them are not. So the question that Arianna and I would have as admissions officers is, what was available to you and what did you do with that? And so that's the thing. So you really can't compare yourself to the rival high school, or whether it's public or private or small or large. They look at you within that context. The other thing I would just say quickly about campus life: many places have living learning dorms. So like I lived in a philosophy dorm one year. There's also language dorms where you're housed with international students who are native speakers of whatever you're speaking, and they'll do like cultural nights. You know, they'll have like a French night or a Spanish night or what have you. But these can also be community service oriented. They can be athletic. There's all sorts of different ones. Some colleges have a lot of them. Some don't have any. Again, it depends.
Absolutely. And there are some campuses that offer, as far as amenities and services, where I don't know how in depth you all want to go, but they offer sometimes laundry services if you don't know how to do your whatever amenity. Maybe that's something that you research into for the particular schools, and that's a factor that is really critical to you. But you do want to have a list of quote unquote non-negotiables, your top 3 priorities that you want considered in your school before you start this search.
Absolutely. I think with amenities and services too, if you need specific learning assistance, or there's some schools that just might have better services to help you succeed than other schools.
Yeah, absolutely. IEPs and everything. Mm-hmm.
All right, extracurriculars and then post-grad opportunities.
So extracurriculars in college are really, really cool, but a couple of caveats here. A lot of times students will like to do stuff they already did in high school. They're really, into whatever that activity is. But they also might want to try something new. So for example, I wanted to try fencing. I'd never done fencing before. So as a freshman in college, I signed up for it. Most colleges will have some sort of activities fair about 2 weeks in. It's after freshman orientation. And these activities will be everything you can think of and more. So there'll be stuff that will be pre-professional societies or community service that works with elderly people or works with young people, or it could be some sort of soccer team or intramural sport. Or I hear every college tour I've been on for the last 20 years has a Quidditch team if you're into that. So there's all these different things out there. And what you'll also find, speaking of colleges kind of being similar, when you go on a college tour, they will inevitably say, we have over 150 different student clubs and organizations, but if we don't have something that you want, just find 7 friends and a faculty advisor and you can start it. So it's very common for freshmen. I know I was guilty of this, signing up for like 20 things. You end up really maybe doing 3, but that's kind of how that works. I will say that it's been interesting. If any students who are interested in journalism, a lot of people who I went to college with, and even students I've worked with who've gone to other colleges, they worked for the student newspaper and now they're reporters at very big gigs. So for example, Willie Geis, who's on MSNBC Morning Joe, he was the editor of the student newspaper at Vanderbilt. He was 2 years ahead of me. I don't know if I ever actually saw him or anything. I don't know if we were in class or anything, but the fact is that work in college helped him with his professional career. So that could be something for you as well. Post-grad opportunities. So one thing I'm finding a lot more universities are doing is that they'll have basically they'll say something like, stay another year, build another future, build a better future. So you can stay on one more year, and they often will offer master's programs you can complete in a year. So if you just want one more encore year at your alma mater, you can certainly do that in many cases. They'll have job fairs and career fairs. Different recruiters will come, everything from nonprofits to government agencies to tech firms to you name it. They're all out there. So those are great things to avail yourself of. Same thing with the Career Center. So when I'm looking at these places as a college counselor, I'm always curious about what are you doing to prepare students for the next step. So internships, career advice, networking, all of that stuff. That is way more important to me than say like a magazine ranking. I want to see what they're actually doing to kind of connect them to the to the university or to the world after that. And graduation rates, oftentimes the data that they cite is actually after 6 years, not 4 years, even though most students will graduate in 4 years. The data they often give you will only graduate in 6 years. And that could be for all sorts of reasons, where a student has something going on in their life, they had to go home and take care of a loved one. But again, you'll see that data. But most of the time, you'll see that the graduation rate is healthily in the upper echelon, like 80% plus. But again, it depends.
Yes. And also with graduation income that can be skewed as well as far as average income earned after graduation. Another thing to look at too is alumni. The alumni, I don't know if it's a statistic to track it, but alumni job board, seeing how strong the networking opportunities are there, or as far as if they have alumni support services with the career development centers of the schools. Those are great things to check out to see how is it as far as job placement after graduation. Is this a university that prioritizes that, or is it not? You want to look at those particular things if they're important to you.
Fantastic. So let's talk about some tips as you're doing your research, as you're starting to make your list and think about what college might be good for you. And then after this, we're going to dive into our Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to start popping them in the Q&A box.
Awesome. So make a vision board, both literally and figuratively. So what that means is though, get the priorities out there, get the non-negotiables as far as things that you really want in your college experience, or that you want them to offer, as well as also maintaining that perspective. You don't want to limit yourself. So if cost is one of those non-negotiables for you, maybe also do your due diligence, do the research to see, is this how much it's actually going to cost? Is this how much is the post-graduation rate a skewed statistic? Am I basing everything on something false? You really want to do that due diligence. Talk to a counselor, talk to a student that's at the school, or maybe that's graduated from the school. Talk to your quad counselor, and just really work out some of those options as far as what should I do for my college list. Again, the college list is working list. It's a working list. So you can add, you can remove. It's not permanent. So if you find that it's a school you really love and you're like, oh man, I already solidified my 15 schools that I'm going to look to apply to, you can switch one out, or you can, it's not an end all be all. Talk about your options with your parents, with your counselors, mentors, those who might be able to offer a different viewpoint and perspective. Maybe talk to Dr. Nick, who's actually been to the 200 plus schools, and see as far as what are some options for you that might align better with what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say that it's funny because even though we've kind of had this technology for years, I know when I was in admissions, my offices didn't utilize as much as we could. But when COVID came around, I feel like I say that every day about something, all these places, all these universities had to figure out how to do their recruitment. Because Arianna and I can tell you that as admissions officers, it's not uncommon for us to be on the road from 4 to 8 weeks in our territory during the fall. But if schools aren't welcoming guests and we can't travel and whatnot, they had to get creative. So they'll give you options to talk to a current student. Tulane would actually walk around with an iPod and point at stuff and tell you what you were looking at. So those are some ways to look at it. You will find, I think this is good news, that pretty much any of the students you talk to, especially from the admissions office, oh my God, my school's the best place ever. I can't imagine going anywhere else. It's the greatest place ever. You just have to go. You have to go. But what that shows you is that you can be happy at lots and lots of different places. So keep an open mind about it, and think about why you're applying there. I've certainly had meetings where a student will say, well, I have to apply to Dartmouth, and I go, okay, well, that wasn't on your list at all. Well, you don't understand, my uncle wants me to. Like, I that's not always the best reason for it. So all that to say, working on getting a balanced list and keep an open mind. I would say very few of the admissions decisions surprise me, and I think Arianna could probably speak to that as well. When I get surprised, I'm usually surprised in a positive way. So a student will say, you didn't think I was going to get in. I did. And I go, great. Everyone's happy when you got in. Awesome. So just keep that in mind. But I always want to tell students, we're on your side. We also want to make sure that we're giving you good guidance so that you're making your best presentation, have the best chance for success.
Absolutely. And that passion is going to come through in your essays as well. If you're not passionate about actually going to the school, it's going to show.
Yep.
All right. Thank you both for all of this information. I learned a lot. I'm sure all of our participants did as well. While we wait for some more questions to come in, Do you both want to, is there like anything that you would tell students that we didn't cover today? Any advice that you wish you were given when you were applying to schools? Just any extra information that you have.
Well, Arianna said something that reminded me. So when you're going on these tours or you're talking to an admissions officer or talking to, like, however you're researching them, whatever it is, write down, and this is a key word, specifically why you want to go there. So for example, like, don't tell me you want to go to Wake Forest because you want to study abroad. Everybody's got study abroad, pretty much. But a better answer is Wake Forest has a house on the canals in Venice, Italy. Say, when I learned that you had a house on the canals in Venice, I was really excited. That's a way better answer. Don't say you want to join, the newspaper at, Columbia. Name the newspaper at Columbia. So use their jargon, so that's really, really important. When we were, what I can tell you is the very selective places are going to ask usually, why us? And my dean used to say at Penn, does this person want to join our community because of what we have to offer, or are they applying because it's Penn? So that's what you got to think about. We would get so many like, Wharton's the best business school. It's not like we're like sitting in Philadelphia going, golly, you got this great business school, but no one knows about it. Wait a minute, this one student from Illinois, they found us. Like, that's, show them that you know them. That's what I always say.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
I think personalizing it is really important and can make you stick out in a ton of ways, from personal statement, your essay questions, like every part of the application process.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you can get to the if you can do an on-campus tour, even better. But if you can't, when I was applying, I'm sure there were actual virtual tours, maybe not as great as they are now, but I did not do a tour of the school. I went completely blind, went straight to Dartmouth. That was it.
Brave.
But if you do have the opportunity to view the campus, it again just adds more reason why you love it or why you're passionate about going. You get to learn those key points, those different things that Dr. Nick was mentioning as far as falling in love with what the school actually has to offer, how you can actually be a part of the community versus just listing off general things about the school. Yeah.
Yeah, so don't say the student faculty ratio is 8-1. Say Professor so-and-so is studying this, and I would really like to be part of her work because I'm also interested in that. Like, that's a way stronger answer, because like the reality is these ultra selective places like the Dartmouths and Penns and Vanderbilts of the world, they're going to get students who are all applying just because of the name, and they really want to see that fit. That's what's really important. This is also why you see a lot of folks that have worked in highly selective admissions go to, as we say, the other side of the desk and help in this role, because we really want to help students get through this process. And it's funneling students into college. It's not fun saying no, but the competition in some of these places is really fierce. So that's what we try to do at Quad, is take exactly what you've done and what you want to do and make it look as good as possible and see what happens. So
Absolutely. So as we've been talking about different types of schools, do you find that when students are making lists, they're applying to only public schools, only private? Do you find that they do better when they're applying to like one specific type, or have you seen students succeed applying to a bunch of different types, maybe some they didn't think that they were interested in? It's like, what is your advice there?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll say I've got a number of students that are pre-med that only want schools that offer pre-med majors. And it's important for you all to know that any like different graduate schools, you can have different majors. It doesn't have to be all STEM to get into medical school. It doesn't have to be all business to get into business school. You expand, do research on the major. If you know that's where your starting point is that you want to go into this particular field, do more research as far as what schools produce these type of students that go into this field, and see what the programs are that make it so unique, that make this many students graduate and go into this particular field. Do research that way versus just schools with pre-med majors.
Yeah, and Arianna hit upon something that I say to students all the time. A lot of the students we work with are business pre-med. Like, I feel like those are kind of two of the most common. Computer science is sort of a close third at that rate. The reality is, like, any major could be pre-med. It's not just bio, it's not just neuroscience. Literally, it can be trumpet and be pre-med. You would just take the pre-med requisites and have an advisor. So you take organic chemistry and what have you. In case in point, I always wondered what admissions officers did during the summer. And the answer is not much. A lot of Netflix and programming, but it's a much quieter time. So at Vanderbilt, we have what we're called update meetings. So we go into the presentation room where we'd have people come in and we talk about the university. So they would have different, organizations on campus. Greek Life, the police department came one time, Women's Center, Study Abroad, Community Service. And one magical day, Vanderbilt Med School admissions came and they gave us 2 documents. And this is really heartening for all of you, even if you're not thinking about these places. They said, here's all the students who applied and were admitted to Vanderbilt's MD program, where they went undergrad, and what they majored in. So when you look at the undergrad list, it's all over the place. Large schools, public schools, small, rural, urban, real big name, ultra selective places you may not have even heard of before, and they were all admitted. Same thing with the majors. Yeah, there was a glut of biology and chemistry, but you'd have people who would major in things like a different language, so they can be multilingual in the operating room, or philosophy. And parents always, oh my goodness, philosophy. Philosophy is a great major for both as a pre-med major or pre-law, because it's all about thinking and argument. When I've helped students with their med school applications, they don't ask science questions, they ask ethical questions. So a pharmaceutical company comes up with a life-saving drug and it costs them many dollars to research this. Are they obligated to give that drug at a free or reduced cost or not? And it's not really about what side you take, it's about the argument. It's that bedside manner. So it's not necessarily I must go to this selected place and major in bio and do this and I'll go into it. Same thing with business. When I did MBA admissions, we had a lot of students who were business majors, but we had other students who were different things. And that can give them, if they had a technology major, an insight into technology, or to social justice issues or public policy, those were really appealing candidates to us.
That's a great point, one that's not touched on a lot at all. I work with a lot of med students, and it's really interesting to hear what backgrounds they come from. And then we do have a webinar on going pre-med in your undergraduate career, ways to get into pre-med programs. Feel free to go watch that. And we cover a lot of this in depth as well. You can find it on the webinars page on our website. Arianna, any other advice that you have, any other tips when it comes to adding different types of schools or looking at different types of schools?
Yeah, I would say, if not already, I would start working on an Excel doc of just schools that are of interest, that you might have even heard about. Just start writing out the schools that are in your peripheral of interest. Again, if you are putting down the reason why you want to go to the school, like Dr. Nick said, as far as, hey, my parents love the school, you want us to look more into it and determine why you also love it too. But at least it's a starting point. So again, start writing out the why. Why do I like this school? What is interesting about it? Write down maybe like 3 facts about what makes it interesting, and do that for every school on your list. And then that way you have a running list as far as, here are things that are commonalities as far as what I'm looking for. Can we work from here? Can we add a couple more schools? And that's when you're working with your quad counselor and can kind of develop that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, talk to friends and family. The school that I went to, I had never heard of, but had a neighbor that went there, recommended it. And I was like, put it off, ended up applying, got in, and then went to go visit, and it turned out to be the perfect place for me, and I fell in love with it. But it was a school I never would have applied to, otherwise never would have heard of it. So definitely keep your mind open. You might find somewhere that maybe is not the big name school, but is a really good fit for you and will allow you to excel.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I would say wherever you are in this process, so a question I often get from parents is, when should you visit and all that, and when should you start visiting? So there's no harm in doing it in 9th or 10th grade. I just think it's a little too early. Students change a lot in 2 years, and when it comes time for applications, colleges can change a lot, programs, policies. So there's no harm in it. It's just a little early. So I would say around this time, if you're a current junior who's going to be a rising senior, what I would say is go to any college you can get to easily, whether it's right down the street or you're visiting grandma in Chicago and you're going to go look at schools there or what have you. But just going on one, because I realize it takes a lot of time, money, and treasure and sanity to go visit these places. You know, you got mom and dad, little brother, days off work, school, like all this stuff. But even if you're going to a place, and if you're like me who wanted to go, you know, somewhere totally different and a totally different part of the country, even if you're looking at a place that's pretty close to you, that gives you a basis as to what to look for. Like, I really like this, I didn't like that, or they had a really cool athletic facility, or they had really great residence halls, or this professor I adore works there, like whatever it is. But that's a good starting point that you can then talk to your counselor about. Well, if you like this place, you might like this other place too.
And if you can't get to places, go onto admissions websites, sign up for virtual programs, sign up to get a brochure sent to you. You can talk to current students. There's so many ways to engage with schools if you aren't able to visit all of the ones that you want to.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the countless YouTube videos I watched just to put myself there. So yes, those are awesome to do as well.
There's tons of days in the life, campus tours, interviews with current students, with professors. There's just millions of resources out there for every school. I think that brings us to the end of our time. I want to thank everyone for joining us. You'll be receiving an email on Monday that has a recording of this webinar. Also, go check out our website. We have a great blog page where you can learn a lot. You can schedule a free consultation with our team, and maybe we can help you figure out what school might be best for you, and help you with that application. Arianna and Dr. Nick, thank you so much for joining us and for your presentation. And I hope everyone has a really great afternoon.
Absolutely.
All
You
right.
all. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
All right. Thanks, folks.